Hello, hello. How's it going?
What's going on?
Not much. Just enjoying another beautiful day. Where are you based, Cass?
I'm in the LA area on the West Coast.
Cool, cool. I spend a lot of time out there. I'm in Miami right now, but how are things out in LA these times of year?
It's fucking cold for some reason. I don't know. I actually got back from Art Basel, and I got off the plane, and I was actually super surprised at how cold it was for some reason. But life is good. What am I complaining about? It's a little cold.
That's LA, right? One or 2 months out of the year, LA's a little chilly. You got to bust out the jackets, but then the rest of the year it's beautiful.
Preach. But I'm excited for this talk today. It's definitely a lot of cool things could come up. I'm curious to hear what you guys are thinking about and what you guys have talked about when it comes to wearables in the past as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I think we're just waiting on one more, and then we'll get started. Once give a couple more minutes. We have one more project that's going to be joining us. But yeah, I was actually at. We might have run into each other. I was at the Art Basel event, and I saw all the merch that you guys had, and that was really cool. It was really cool to see. It was a really nicely done, exhibition of everything. So kudos to you guys.
I appreciate you coming through. Now that I'm thinking about it, we had that whole like wall that people signed, and I wanna go back and see if I can find your tag on it.
Yeah, it's somewhere on there. I think I might have signed it as Metaverse NFT and then tried to draw a little Satoshi mask, but failed miserably with the marker because I had to do it so small. So definitely not a drawing I'm proud of, but it was fun. It was awesome to kind of see everything out there and get to meet some ones. I got my swag bag, so that was a good time. And hello, hello, to how do you pronounce your name? Is it Idalu or Edalu from Eyes of Fashion?
GM, yes, Edalu.
Edalu. So very, very nice to have you.
Thank you.
And so we have and is you go by Cass or is
Yeah,
it is there all right, cool. So we've got Cass and Idalu, and we're going to be starting real soon. We'll start with some introductions today. I guess I can kind of get started with our little intro. What we do these every week. The goal of the Hideout is to really dive deep with some awesome, people from different projects within the metaverse, but to dive deep into issues that are emerging issues, things that we really need thought leadership on, and we've been fortunate to be able to have some of the biggest thought leaders in the space on here, and I think that we this is going to be another great one. I think what Artifact's been doing in the kind of digital slash physical space with everything they've done with their NFTs is incredible, and so really pioneers. So really glad to have Cass here. And then I loved what you guys are doing with Eyes of Fashion. My wife is a huge fan, and we both have some NFTs, so I'm really excited to have you here as well and talk about some of the what you're doing with wearables. I actually got into NFTs back in 2017, and right when Decentraland was starting, and wearables were a huge thing that really helped crystallize some of the things that would be possible with this space. So I'm really excited to dive in on that. So I guess we'll just start with some introductions. For those who don't know me, my name is Nick Frontera. I am the founder and project lead I'm one of the founders and the project lead of the Satoshi Verse. Like I said, I've been in the space since 2017. Before that, I was working for the man as a lawyer for 6 years in the entertainment and IP space. I've been working with Jose Delbo, who's a well-known comic artist within the space, to create and our team, obviously, at Apollo Entertainment. We've got about 30 people right now working on the project, many based in Colombia, and we're creating the Satoshiverse, which is a blockchain-based superhero universe with a pretty strong comic ties and a comic theme. And right now we are in the process of building a roguelike third-person action RPG that is set to release in alpha in January of this coming year. So I won't belabor the Satoshiverse too much. If you guys want to check out the socials and the website, we've got tons of info on there. But what I really want to focus on is our awesome guests. So, Cass, why don't you start and talk to us a little bit about yourself? And for those who haven't heard of Artifact and everything you guys are doing, give us a quick introduction, and then we'll go to Eyes of Fashion.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what Artifact is, it's a digital luxury brand, focuses a lot on digital experiences first, but then also very, very cultured when it comes to the actual high-end luxury good world. All the founders come from either streetwear or luxury fashion. And one of the things, obviously, that we kind of are known for is being partnered with Nike. So there are certain things that, we've done that kind of branch out into branding with Nike on the Web3 space. For me, myself, I'm a community manager and basically started the whole DGen life last summer. I was, running around flipping projects, kind of just testing things that I saw in the space. And then I found Artifact, and I was already kind of in that headspace where I wanted to just dive deep into one community and make a big bet somewhere. And yeah, I was obsessed. So around this time last year, I was really starting to do a lot of mod stuff. Joined as like a moderator in January. Been on full time since I don't know, 6 months ago. So it's been a whirlwind because there's a lot of things always going on, and Artifact is known for doing a lot of stuff. But yeah, it's really cool to see. I have a lot of faith in what the future of digital wearables could be and what the future of digital fashion could be. So it's just exciting to be out here and kind of enjoying seeing history be built and hopefully take part in it myself.
100% no, and like I said before, big fans of what you guys are doing. I think it's inspired, a lot of other creators like ourselves. We're definitely seeing things, and I think it really seeing what you guys have been able to accomplish with Nike has really pushed the limits on what might eventually, what we might eventually see in this space. So hats off to you guys, obviously. And all right, so Eyes of Fashion. Could you introduce the project a little bit and also yourself?
Hi. This is Edalu. I am Chief Fashion Officer of Eyes of Fashion. Sorry, I was just having some champagne. It's 7 o'clock in Paris. Um, we're a project that is by the artist. Kaz, are you in Paris? I know some of the team in Artifact are here in Paris.
I wish. I was gonna say it's 10 a.m. in LA, so the idea of having champagne in Paris right now sounds really nice.
Yeah. I actually met is it Benito or Benoit? I think I met him in a conference last year. No, this year actually, earlier this year. The Going back to Eyes of Fashion. So Eyes of Fashion is a project. It's a fashion NFT created by artist Talia Soref. She is a fashion illustrator, so her story is very cool because she started to come into fashion weeks. I mean, I would say like about 10 years ago. She had done Milan, New York, Paris Fashion Week, and they will seat her in the front row. These companies like Dior, Fendi, Chanel, Valentino, she has collaborations with all of them. They will seat her in the front row, and she would sketch the celebrities and the clothes of that fashion show. But then, after 10 years of doing that, the pandemic started, so she can no longer fly, and she starts to figure out, okay, so there's a new technology. I can put my art digitally. I can create NFTs, but how do I do it? And she started to she started to go into Facebook groups to try to learn how the technology was actually done. And she found her co-founder. They're both based in Israel. You know, he goes by Cinta in Twitter. And they did it. And in February of 2022, they minted 8,888 pieces, and they were minted in 2 minutes. So that was outstanding. You know, we were not in the bear market, so it's different times back then. I remember minting. It was one of my first mints, actually. Then I met Talia in May. So kind of like a quick story about me. I used to be in finance for a long time in New York and in San Juan. I'm from Puerto Rico. And after doing 15 years in finance, I was like, I'm the financial crisis. I needed to just change. So I just completely did a 360 and started fashion design here in Paris. And I worked for several houses like Kenzo and Euro Paris and Paris and some other smaller ones. And I launched my line of accessories mostly back in 2020. And at some point in late of 2021, I come across NFTs, and it was just like a beautiful merge of finance and fashion. So I was just hooked from the beginning, and I started to go into the women-led space and going to some of the projects, you know, World of Women and BFF, and you know what was happening with the women's space, just because I wanted to be kind of more in a women-led community. And fast forward to May, I started to feel more comfortable with speaking about the subject. So like my first product this year was an ebook about women and NFTs, like golf NFTs for girls. So I started to feel more comfortable with the subject, and in May they invited me to speak at a conference in Monaco, and that's where I met Talia. And I tell her I'm a holder, and she's like, "This is the first time that I meet holders, because you know this is like the first time that we were coming out into conferences." So I met her there. Then I met her in Paris because she had another conference here and in New York for NFTYC. And after like meeting a few times and just talking about what we're both doing, she said, "I would love for you to be part of the team and come on board and help us build, you know, more of a brand." We definitely want to build as a fashion, and it's a very recognizable, um, iconic art, which I'm going to explain now where it comes from. So you see that we have the eyes of fashion is the icon. Instead of having like a face, it's just eyes, because it means like the judgment that she felt while being in the fashion industry, like you know the traditional fashion industry. And I could totally relate, because especially in Paris, the fashion industry is very elite, and you can feel that judgment on yourself all the time. Like if you're not part of that elite group, it's very hard to like open the circles and just be part of that. So that was like how these drawings came about, and this judgment. And what we're trying to do now is just bridge that gap. For our holders, we are verified in Decentraland, so we already do wearables for Decentraland. We do digitals because we have a collaboration with Anywhere, so you can go there and you can design your own garment, if it's like pants or dresses, whatever that is. They have a bunch of options, and then you can select the art that you want them, and you will get the physical item, and then you will also get the digital item. And then at some point, I was like, you know, like Decentraland, it's cool. We do, you know, we'll do events there. People will go there, but how about doing something in the metaverse that people are currently in, like Zoom calls, video calls, Google Meetup calls? You know, let's do a wearable that they can use like now, and they can use in their own event, not just because we made an event. So that's where the digital earrings come about. I'll pin them to the top after, and that's how it just came out to you know have those digital earrings that we have now. And you know it's been great just kind of building, you know, with all of the space. You know, our supporters are super amazing. They're really great. I just came from being in a space with the Bugatti group. We're part of their retail merchant program, so there's gonna be some luggage that is gonna come out with the eyes of fashion art, and holders are going to be able to be part of that process and help us choose what design that we're going to pick for that. And they're going to also be able to print their own PFPs into half of the luggage if they want. So that's going to come out, and definitely will will build in some sort of augmented reality experience to that design that ends up being in the bag. So, people can go with their phone, and if you're like in an airport and somebody likes the luggage, they can kind of use their phone to kind of like find out what is that this project is about, and things like that. And just, you know, more efforts into bringing the brand out there, into, getting more eyes of fashion. So definitely 2023 is going to be the year that we're just going to, try to be very aggressive into building that brand out there. And I think I've spoken enough.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, I think that's awesome, and I actually think it's really cool that both you and Cass were part of, the community first, and then kind of really felt strongly about the project and got involved with the team. I think that's such an interesting organic way that I think we're seeing a lot of these teams and communities grow. It's certainly something that we're actively, working on ourselves for our launch and ways of getting the community much more deeply involved, because those are the people who have been with you, from the beginning. So I think that's so cool and so important. But yeah, I'm stoked to dive into the questions. Hearing these introductions makes me very excited to jump into these topics. So Spencer, could you give us a quick introduction of yourself and then jump into the questions?
Sure thing. My name is Spencer Vogel. I've been working with Apollo Entertainment for about a year and a half now. I've been in crypto and NFTs since 2017, 2018. I guess I got my start in the digital fashion stuff buying some of the Fabricant Atari NFTs back in, I think it was 2018, 2019. So yeah, cool to kind of get my start in that space, and then moved on to, now I'm a CloneX holder, and I've bought every single, thanks Cass for making me spend all my money, but I've bought every single CloneX an artifact piece of fashion that's come out of the project. So I know a lot about artifact, and excited to dive in more, but also very excited to hear about Eyes of Fashion, since I'm just learning about you guys, for the first time this week. So I'm basically going to be the host for today, and going to go through. We have a bunch of questions that are designed for everyone, that are more panel style. You guys can jump in and answer as you want, and then I have some individual questions for each of you as well. So to jump into one of the questions for everyone, and Cass, why don't you start us off with here, and then everybody else can jump in. So what are some of the benefits that the Web3 technology brings to the fashion industry?
So one of the things that I thought Artifact did really well, and was definitely a unique concept, is just limiting the amount of waste that goes into creating a product line. For some people who might not know, a lot of the high-end luxury companies, if bags are made and there's defects, they burn them. If there's like too many supply, they don't sell out, they burn them. Like, you literally will have people just like straight up making $1,000 bags and throwing them into an incinerator for no reason other than like they just don't want it to be out there. Which, like, that's cool if you want to have limited supply of things and stuff like that, but the easy way to do that is with authentication and blockchain technology. And obviously now that we have like the whole concepts of e-commerce kind of moving towards Web3 as well, it takes everything that people were doing in the collecting world with fashion and makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I've never even, thought of that. And I feel like I spend all day thinking about these things. And it's really interesting to kind of think of it in that way, right? By eliminating, being able to more accurately gauge the true demand for your product, and really only create what needs to be created to fulfill that demand. I think that's kind of it's probably not the thing that most people lead with, but it's a really interesting effect or addition or bonus to, or even use case generally. I think that's really cool. So glad you brought that up. That makes me think about a lot of things. I'm sure my mind will go down a rabbit hole. For me, I've so as I mentioned before, I was a lawyer before I did this, and I was working a lot in the copyright space, doing a lot of intellectual property law, and I was kind of on the side, a metaverse junkie, and saw Ready Player One, and read the book, and just like very excited about all of that. But there was this whole body of law that applied for when you have a T-shirt, right, with a logo on it, or your Nike your Nike check or the swoosh or the R logo or the artifact logo. There's a whole system that talks about what happens when someone has that shirt and where they can go with it and what they can do with it and if they can sell it or not. But for the longest time, and really up until very recently, there hasn't been much of the same in the way of digital items, right? And items for the metaverse. These deals were kind of one-off deals with platforms, and you got a right to show that item in a particular platform, right? A right to display it, but you really didn't have any kind of ownership rights over an item, over a wearable, over whatever it was, that were separate from the IP that was actually on it. So for me, kind of also an in the weeds huge benefit is that the blockchain and NFTs open up a ton of potential to adopt a lot of the rules and regulations that apply to physical goods and create that same sort of tangibility separate from the IP that's available, with digital goods. And I think that while nuanced is very important because it's what allows the potential for something like interoperability, right? Because the reality is if I, have a game and I want to support an artifact, hoodie in my game with a Nike logo on it, right? There's no set of laws or rules other than I have to reach out to Nike or Nike's got to have terms of service that allow for that, that, that allow that to happen. So you're kind of at the whim of the original IP holder. But if we truly want, an open metaverse or a metaverse, like a lot of people are thinking, with this transferability of IP and kind of the ability to use things for personal purposes in different places, you need that kind of tangibility layer like we do in the real world, where you have a t-shirt with a Nike check and, swoosh, and no one's telling me I can't go into, an Adidas store with that t-shirt. It's kind of the same thing. I think eventually it'll need to be the same thing in the metaverse. So I think Web3 potentially provides that tangibility layer so that we can start to establish those standards for, open interoperability in the metaverse. And that's, it's a little nuanced, but I think to me that's a very important part of what got me very, very interested about this space originally.
Yeah, I no, I was gonna say that we have had this conversation, and I totally agree that there's so much opportunity to just create, once interoperability becomes a factor. We're buying all these digital wearables, but we don't really have what to do with them, and that's gonna just open, the gate for us to be able to, exchange them, sell them, swap them, buy them, and I think that's gonna be a game, quote unquote game changer for all of us in digital fashion.
Yeah, and I think another really big piece of it is like the proving authenticity and proving scarcity of these items as well. It's Louis Vuitton could come out and say that they only made 1,000 of these specific handbags or whatever, but you don't really know 100% for sure. Whereas with blockchain tech, we're able to really verify that there's only X number of editions that were made. So I think that's a really, really cool aspect of it as well. Moving on to the next question. So this one is to everyone as well. Digital fashion has become popular through the sale of skins in Web 2 games like Fortnite. How will this translate into Web 3 gaming?
Yeah, I could take a shot at answering this first since we're building a game. I know Artifact is too. Um, I think for me, this again kind of harkens back to some of the legal stuff when you're talking specifically about which doors Web3 opens. Obviously skins for the last 10 years have been this incredibly, lucrative model for developers, right? But the big part of that model that's really persisted and why they make so much money off of these skins is that there isn't really an aftermarket, and those skins are fairly limited to a particular closed ecosystem. So whether it's Fortnite or Call of Duty or whatever game it may be, typically the skins that you purchase are limited to your account and typically they have to be used within the ecosystem that you purchase them in. And so I think what Web3 does is it gives us the potential, at least, to not only change that from a technical perspective, but to start to think about the systems that would need to be implemented, kind of standards of practice, right? Things that we kind of agree are the standard set of rules for the creation of IP in this space that would allow us to have kind of that one. I think the kind of the two angles: one, interoperability, right? The ability to use things in one place and another without the explicit consent of the developers on both sides. So, right, like having rules that are generally accepted or adhered to under some standard, set of terms or whatnot, that can be applied. And I think that's a little bit further down the road. But more immediately, kind of just the ownership, right? The true ownership of that underlying asset, the tangibility, the property rights that you have in that asset, and the ability to go and then freely transfer that asset on an aftermarket. And I think from a consumer standpoint, that's significant, but from a developer standpoint, it's also significant, because the fact that this technology now exists and is slowly kind of moving through and starting to, more and more people are starting to see that it's a better system for consumers, that kind of takes some of the value out of the developers' hands and returns it to the consumers. I think developers really need to focus on creating sustainable models that can support this open system, right? Because it's no longer that you can kind of just keep feeding people these things, and the only source of water is your faucet, right? I think once you have a secondary market, you need to be cognizant of the fact that there is this whole ecosystem and economy that you're creating, and it's not just one direction. It's peer to peer, and I think that once developers can embrace that and start to think, okay, well, obviously we're not going to make as much money on the front end, but how do we create a sustainable model, either through royalties or through upgrades or through some sort of connection of different assets with new assets? How do you do that and continue to have a sustainable business model? I think that's going to move the space forward a ton as well, so that we can get out of these kind of closed ecosystems where everything is Fortnite specific or Call of Duty specific. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but love to know your guys' thoughts on this one as well.
I from my point of view is watching like the big luxury houses in Paris, right? So watching Louis Vuitton and Gucci and Burberry and some of the other big fashion houses that normally are very late to the game of technology. Like, you couldn't buy a Chanel bag on a website maybe until like 3 years ago or something like that. So exactly, they were really slow to get into the game, right? So, but this time around, it's different. And some of them are coming out with like their new drops or NFTs, but most of them right now are just focusing on the skins and the wearables, because they realize that there's a new generation of Gen Zs that are spending 8 hours a day, not only playing the game, but socializing, and they want to wear something to that metaverse that they're spending time on. So they're buying from $100 to like thousands of dollars of a skin because it's a Louis Vuitton or a Gucci skin. And these are a new generation that these brands thought to themselves, wait, like in a few years, they're gonna have a purchasing power to be able to buy our physicals. They're already gonna be onboarded, part of our brand, part of our family. And as soon as they can, they're gonna be able to buy a physical product. So let's just play here, right? And I think, talking about the sustainability, finally, after like a decade of hearing about sustainability, it is the first time that I finally hear something meaningful for these people. And I say that in the sense of, for them, but the bottom line is important. So now that they're seeing such a big amount of revenue coming into their brands from digital wearables that they can now like realize, okay, now we can make less clothes because now we're going to get a lot of money from the digital wearables. And this is what they're thinking. They're definitely there. You can see it on LinkedIn every day. There's chief metaverse officers coming every day for jobs in some of the in most of the brands. So I think that it's very interesting what's happening and how are they going to incorporate, NFTs into the whole, wearables, and how does that come? I think it's going to be very interesting to see that. But it's so interesting to see that these people that were so slow to get into it are really now just like going so fast because they finally got it. And I think this finally brings something meaningful to the sustainability conversation.
Yeah, I really agree with both of what you both said, and especially what Nick was kind of hinting at in the earlier parts. Because to me, skins have proven why NFTs matter or why NFTs can even exist. Just because if people are willing and super excited to spend money on something that they digitally don't own, then what happens when you technically own it, and we're kind of seeing that. And you can look around the space. There are so many different groups that have taken different approaches to what skins are. Like we've seen with like Jenkins or not. Who's the Taylor from the Bored Ape group? Somebody's gonna tag me in it or something afterwards. But we see it with like some clones right now. They have the AR hoodies on. Some people are rocking a jacket that another clone wears, and the concept of like moving your digital assets into a more customizable fashion, that's a really cool concept. I think we'll see a lot of people take, but the overall concept of skins, I think the genius of that is really just proves NFTs, and that's now it's like, all right, what Nick was saying, what does this access actually give you? Are we actually going to get to an interoperable future where you can run around with your specific asset in every favorite video game? If so, then how do we get all developers aligned to do that? But it's an interesting future, and I think we're going to see a lot of like variations of what a skin might be, so to speak.
Cool. Thank you, Cass. Next question is actually directly back to you. So Artifact really exploded into the Web3 fashion scene after releasing the NFT and physical collection of shoes with artist Ferocious. So not too long after, Artifact was acquired by Nike. Curious, how has Artifact's experience making both digital and physical fashion items influence its goals and strategy in the Web3 space?
Man, you're asking good questions, but business operations stuff is the fun part, in my opinion. It's like the most people don't realize. My background is in cybersecurity, doing a lot of like B2B sales and project management, and so basically what I learned over the years was just realizing how a lot of organizations have to work to get their goals done, and what's important to that organization. And seeing Artifact internally, it's definitely cool because it's very much a startup vibe, but the focus is definitely on a lot of digital aspects. And while there are physical aspects, that just is another like factor that kind of comes into play, because if a group is going to go out and say with the CRL drop that we just had, we're going to have physical shoes being made. What does that digital aspect look like? Where does that utility tie in? What does that do long term for the people that are trying to utilize this asset? So there's definitely a lot of questions and a lot of things that always have to be answered and tweaked and refined. But that's why it's cool, because it's a brand new world, and you're not seeing usually as much focus from organizations where they're super digitally focused, but also almost as focused on physical goods as well. So super fun.
Nice. Yeah, totally agree. And I think I spend so much time in the digital space, especially recently, that and anytime I have the opportunity to do something physical, I get especially excited about it, and very cool when you get to connect the two as well. So the next question is to Idalu. So what excites you about designing fashion for the Web3 space?
What excites me the most is, you know, this notion of your digital presence, your digital identity, how we are now going to crave and want to have a digital identity that may be different from your real life identity. So I feel that that's super important. I feel that people are going to be interested about that, curious. I already, even, we have one set of earrings. I already want to make more earrings so we can just change them and change my, my avatar, the way that it's looking. And, it's funny. When I was in my teenage years, I guess I've definitely played Nintendo. I haven't played since, but I've been curious to go back and play. And obviously my kids are in that age as well. So I feel that there's going to be curiosity for people to just, want to have that digital identity. So I think that's what really gets me very interested to see how people are going to play with that. People are going to not want to just stay with one PFP. They're even want to accessorize it. Even if it's your real self or or your avatar. I think in both cases, like if you look down below in the audience, that's me, and I'm wearing the earrings, which totally look real. But then if you also have a PFP, you're now going to be able to accessorize it and change it into different clothes depending how you feel. So I think that's something that I'm really interested in seeing how that's going to evolve. I feel that and I'm gonna like kind of enter into this AI conversation, but it's really interesting that the last 2 weeks my Instagram, and I'm gonna give out my age, but I'm 40 something, and my Instagram is going to be it's filled with my friends, right, which are other 40 somethings, and the feed that I'm seeing the last 2 weeks is like all of them are creating like the AI version of themselves. They think it's a filter. They don't realize that it's AI. How does that work? Why is it useful? Like you could use AI to filter your Google Sheets. You could use AI to create new art. You can use AI for a bunch of things. But for now, and it's so interesting, after more than a year talking about NFTs and blockchain and digital fashion, this is what's getting people excited because they're just trying to transform themselves. So if you see what's happening with AI, then you are going to be able to see what could happen when we just kind of like open the doors for them to see what else they can do to themselves, because at this point it's all about themselves. It's another filter, it's something that they can play with, it's creating another identity. So I think that's going to be really cool to see.
I just have to jump in there really quick because I totally agree that it's so funny seeing this AI trend happening where people are starting to use it and they have no idea, because it's exactly what we saw with the Snapchat like dog filter. And I'm telling you, like I've said it so many times, but that was the secret to getting everyone to love AR. And we didn't even know what it was. Like nobody calls Snapchat or Instagram filters AR, but like it is an altered version of reality. And thanks to one random dog filter and a bunch of people going crazy with it, it's cool. So everybody just needs to do a bunch of AI shit, and we'll get everybody converted to Web3 soon enough.
Yeah, and I think that also just like shows the importance of I guess like obfuscating the technology and letting people kind of just run with it. I mean, now we're seeing a rebrand of like digital collectibles, over the use of NFTs. So I think it's important to kind of put things in context that people understand, and they can oftentimes get confused by the new technology. So next question is to Nick. So you were involved in some of the earliest implementations of fashion in Web3 through Decentraland Wearables way back in the day. So what was that experience like, and what changes have you seen in the industry since then?
Yeah, so it was interesting, and I think I came into the space because of Decentraland, or at least it was kind of my portal into crypto and the blockchain space a long time back. But what I loved about Decentraland is kind of the simplicity of it in the early days allowed it to be a very good experiment for tackling a lot of the issues that would eventually and will eventually persist in a decentralized metaverse, right? And so wearables at first for me, it was just cool that these were some of the first, if not the first. I can't confirm that they were the first, but NFT wearables, but I believe they were. and at least seeing them in a metaverse and actually used and on an avatar, right? There was something about that that just felt special, and so I think I went a little crazy and became one of the biggest collectors of NFT wearables in Decentraland. But that gave me kind of a perspective on some of the things that would eventually be issues that we had to deal with. So like I remember probably about 6 months in, the wearables themselves were being created by the Decentraland team, and they had their team of artists, and they were creating some cool stuff. But of course, you had tons of artists saying, "Hey, we want to create some wearables too. How do we do this? What does that look like?" And so, within a decentralized metaverse and kind of this idea of openness, there had to be this ability for other people to create wearables. But at the time, Decentraland was still somewhat centralized. It hadn't gone to the DAO yet. And so there was a lot of talk and discussion about, well, how does that work? How do we prevent, exploits? How do we keep people from stealing other people's IP? How do we verify that certain people are the true creators? How do we limit supply so as to not completely destroy, the economy that we've already built around these wearables? And so there were some really interesting talking points in the beginning specifically about how the creator economy could work in terms of metaverse wearables. And so I actually wrote a proposal, totally didn't amount to much other than being a framework for people to start thinking about what would eventually be a real DAO proposal, but for how we could implement metaverse wearables within Decentraland and have community created wearables, and kind of trying to think of how all these dots connected. And then, eventually that passed and people were able to create wearables. But one of the cool things that, doing that and getting that involved in the wearables in Decentraland early on was that when the team was ready to release this new feature, which was called linked wearables, which basically allowed you to have a wearable that only presented itself in world if you had an NFT. So really, in my opinion, the first instance of wearable interoperability within different worlds, because it was actually linked to the same NFT. We were actually able to do the first linked wearables collection through Satoshiverse and create wearables that varied depending on which Legionnaire you had. And so if you had a Legionnaire with a Los Muertos, the skulls and whatnot, blue, you would have an avatar in Decentraland with that wearable available, but only by owning the NFT. There wasn't like a separate NFT. And I think that again, it was a simple implementation. A lot of the back end code was kind of hacky, but at its core, that was us being able to work with a platform to take our NFT and represent it in a different way within Decentraland. And I think that what it's taught me probably more than anything is that these are complicated issues, and there's a lot of considerations when we're thinking about interoperability, when we're thinking about licensing, when we're thinking about IP rights, when we're thinking about cross-platform type stuff, and even just we were a high fidelity project where all of our stuff was 4K quality, and then we had to kind of represent that in a different way, in a low poly way, in Decentraland so that it would actually work in the world. So there were a ton of developmental, technical things that we had to think through. But at the end of the day, that experience, I think, has allowed us to build off that. And now, we're looking at other wearable, and I think we'll get to this later, but we're looking at other wearable type things within the Satoshiverse that will allow us to kind of further expand how people, express themselves within our world. And yeah, that was definitely a fun learning experience. And we won't talk about the amount of money I spent on those wearables to have that learning experience, but it's all good. Everyone's wrecked, so I can join the party.
Thanks for sharing that experience, Nick. I wish the wearables were doing a little bit better for you. So the next question we're going to open up to everyone again. So we talked a little bit about how we've seen some of these big fashion brands already start to enter the metaverse and Web3 space. But I want to know, what do you think it will take for more major fashion labels and brands and designers to follow suit? Maybe Edalu, you want to start us off with that
Yeah, I
one?
can jump in. I think and this is not a fashion brand, but you know, if we think about Starbucks, what they're starting to do with creating this, all basically building on an already existing loyalty program. So I think the brands are going to realize the power of community, and some of them already do. And it's interesting to see that we have brands like Lacoste that they have a 60,000 people, maybe even more, Discord. So that's community, right? So I think that there's going to be this kind of like, wow, there's the power of community that I feel that they're going to want to build on that. If they're going to create a metaverses for creating showrooms and experiences for people to come in, that's another part. But it's like building experiences for community, which we used to refer to them as clients. They're now community. So I feel that that's what brands. I mean, that's what they should gravitate to. How can I make the experience of my clients, now my community, be more meaningful, be exciting, be like, you know, awesome, for just to jump into my products and be part of my family of products and be part of, my community. So I think, see, and there's everything. Like every day I see another brand, small, big, coming into a space. And I think some of them are getting it right. Some of them are just going to test the waters. But what is interesting, and I think what's important, is that for each brand to maintain their DNA. They really have to think about their DNA. They cannot get into this because it's the new thing. They need to really be thoughtful of that, and what makes sense for our community. And I think if they do that, they'll be successful.
Yeah, Cass, I don't really have specific thoughts on this, but I'd love to kind of ask your thoughts on kind of a segment of this question. I mean, obviously, brands can kind of collaborate with Metaverse studios, and we've done some of that in the past through our studio. But, Nike kind of pulled the trigger, nine-figure deal to make this core to its mission, right, through acquiring Artifact, and which I think is kind of the future, right? You're going to have these major brands realize that whether it's fashion or just a metaverse presence is kind of the angle, and the easiest and fastest way to do that is to bring an established company within, and to really, you know, both support their IP, like the clones that existed before, but I'm sure that Nike's got its own stuff that Artifact is at least advising on, or helping with, and you don't have to go into the secrets and stuff that you can't talk about. But I'm curious if your perspective as being a company that was essentially acquired by one of these bigger brands has kind of colored how these bigger brands are thinking about the metaverse play, and what we might see in the future, as other bigger brands think about doing similar things.
Yeah, I think Elu nailed it. There's a lot of people coming because you see the headlines, and I think that's the core of it. That's the core of my answer. The reason why more people come in is because they're gonna feel like they're losing, and they're gonna just see market share and attention and all of these different things happening in this Web3 space will keep growing, and people will just be forced to almost jump in and at least test it out, like we've seen with like websites in the past and other forms of e-commerce. But I think the mindset, from a less like high level dickheadish answer, but from a more like serious note, I think a lot of organizations have always known that consumer experience or buyer experience or buyer behavior is the most important thing. A lot of the stuff that we're looking at when we talk about like luxury goods or just experiences that people really look back on fondly, most of the time it's curated and it's really created around the culture that you're trying to perpetuate or build. And that's what we're doing in Web3 as well. It just looks a little bit different. I don't think every group is going to have a quote unquote metaverse. I think there are a lot of groups that will want to have more gamified experiences. They'll want to see themselves in places where like it's just fun to be. And I think that's the big thing, is really what is the next step for a lot of these groups, is how do you build like a digital experience people look at and say, damn, like how was I not a part of that even though I'm online all the time? Like that's that's where it starts to change a little bit in this space, but the concepts are always kind of the same in the end.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So up next, we're going to announce our winners of our giveaway. So every week at our spaces, we give away one of our avatars from the Satoshiverse. And this week, we're also getting a giveaway from Eyes of Fashion. They're going to be giving away one of their DCL wearables, Decentraland wearables. So the winner of our 8Mo Army avatar is going to be Alts Anonymous. Congratulations. And then the winner of the Eyes of Fashion Decentraland wearable is Gutter X Ant. Congratulations to both our winners, and make sure to just send us a DM. Let us know that you won, and then we'll also be in touch. So we're heading towards the end of the hour here, and got a few more questions for each of you guys. So last question for Nick. So how's the Satoshiverse thinking about wearables and fashion in its game?
Yes, so I mean, we've kind of already done a few things within our, the collections themselves, right? The Legionnaires themselves are covered from head to toe in clothing, and so fashion and wearables were a big part of the design on the 12 different body types as to what actually made them unique with the different textures and patterns, and specifically with the masks. Our project puts the mask at a very important kind of central way of identifying yourself within the ecosystem. And I think we are definitely looking to do more with that in the future. And we've found that the masks are a very good canvas for expression. And we're working on a few things that I think will be really interesting with our community. But, when we did the 8Mo collection, we came out with a kind of a line of the higher end, the rarer ones, that wore something called Ape Couture, which kind of had this, high fashion brand, pattern to it, and different variants. We're looking at working currently with a provider to do merch with similar, branding, and potentially have those patterns and some of the stuff that we've designed for our digital wearables, translate into the real world. So that's definitely something that we're excited about. We had that Decentraland, from an interoperability standpoint. We're definitely looking for other ways to do that. So I think, right now the Metaverse clients are fairly limited and very non-standard. But I think over the course of the next year, there's going to be a lot more standardization of those clients for different metaverses, and you're going to see some, asset standards emerge. And I think once that happens, we'll start to be able to create assets that can be more easily used within our ecosystem, which is of course something we're looking at, but used within other ecosystems as well. And those types of aesthetic things will just continue to grow, I think, within our ecosystem as those opportunities start to develop a little bit more.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. Up next to Edilu. So what are some of the things that Eyes of Fashion is doing to push the Web3 space forward in general? Some of the initiatives you guys are working on.
Yeah, so, apart from, our Decentraland wearables, our digital items, and now our digital wearables with the earrings, we want to play a little bit more with just that experience of what augmented reality can be if your phone, is put in front of a specific design, and that just opens, this Pandora box of other experiences that you can see. And the other day I even, met with somebody that talked about feeling NFTs, just those experiences. I think this is something that's going to be interesting, and just creating those, immersive experiences with each product, not just like selling products, but just like creating, something that unlocks another perk or unlocks another experience. So I think these are the things that, we want to definitely try to work on in the future.
Very cool. Very excited to continue to follow along with what you guys are doing and see what you guys continue to do to build the space. Um, and then our last question here before we wrap up is going to go to Cass. So, looking at the effort that you guys have put into building experiences like the Monolith Quest, it's pretty clear that gamification is very, very important to Artifact. So, I was curious, how is Artifact building gamification into its products, both digital and physical?
Man, alpha questions.
Sorry,
So
share what you can.
yeah, no. But you guys see it already. For those who might have been following along, but for those who haven't seen, Artifact definitely has concepts that are very centered around gamification. If you look at like the crypto kick dunks that came out like 7-8 months ago, there was a whole leveling up process that they kind of hinted at where you'll be able to level up the skins that you had. And if you also look at some of the other teasers that have been out there with like the inventory system, a lot of the wearables in general might have some sort of classification to them or some rank. Even if you go onto the Artifact web page now and just look at any of like the wearable NFTs you have, you can kind of see what they're going for in terms of gamifying. And yeah, it's all part of that building an immersive experience, I think, for the long term, because for me personally, when I look at the NFT space, it just seems like a giant video game. There's all sorts of characters you can get. There's all sorts of, places you can go and access if you have the right characters, or if you know the right people, you ask the right questions. It's the game of life in a way, but we're just kind of building it out in this weird Web3 Twitter, Discord, social media setup that we got going on. But when it comes to actual projects like Artifact, taking that a step further, there's definitely thoughts and designs for long-term use versus, hey, this is just a shirt that's gonna have a 3D version of it next to it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. On the physical end, I mean, something that you guys have kind of already dropped and hinted at is for the CRL shoes that you guys released last week, is that you guys are going to be having move to earn capabilities, which I think is a really, really cool implementation of gamification within the physical sneakers that you guys are releasing. But yeah, so we're at the top of the hour here. Nick, do you want to wrap us up? If anybody else has anything else to say, otherwise though.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, this was a total pleasure. Really, really glad that we got to jump on and talk about fashion and where this is all going. We keep trying to do these hideouts with different topics, and we really do want to just push people's minds, really think through these topics. And I think today was a really great panel, and for me, and I hopefully for everybody else. So thank you both so much for joining us. We'd love to have you on again in the future as things continue to develop. I think that's one of the great things about this space, is that these topics never go stale, because 2 weeks from now there's going to be something mind bending that comes out from some corner of the space. But thank you to the panelists. Thank you to everyone who joined. This is actually going to be our last hideout of the year, so we will be back with fresh new topics and panelists and whatnot in the new year. But we've done 12 so far, so they're all available on our YouTube, and we'll probably do a post soon with all of the links in them. But I would encourage everyone who enjoyed this, who hasn't listened to some of the other topics. We had a couple really great ones these last couple weeks, so really, really excited to keep doing this. Thank you again so much, Cass and Elu, for joining. If you haven't already followed the projects on here, please do. Please check them out. We try to pick our panelists on people who are really moving the space forward. So really 2 awesome projects here, and I really hope that you guys can get some value from them. But otherwise, check out the Satoshiverse if you're not familiar with it. Our socials or our website. Join the Legionnaires, join the 8 Mil Army. We've got our game coming out on January 10th in alpha for our Legionnaire holders. So really, really excited for what's coming, and really excited to keep following Artifact and Eyes of Fashion and see all the great stuff that you guys are doing. True, leaders in the space, and I'm excited to keep being a participant in everything you guys are doing. So thank you again, and unless you guys want to say anything, we'll wrap it up.
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. And one thing that's very important, Web 2 fashion is not the same as Web 3 fashion. So we're all, collaborating in the space. So I would love to open, all the information on your projects to the ISO fashion community. So I'll send you guys DM to see how we can definitely collaborate, because this is Web 3, again, not Web 2.
Amazing. Yes. Thank you so much. And we'll be signing off. Thanks again. And we will talk to all of you soon. Have a great holiday.
Thank you guys. See ya.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.